All right, good evening, everyone. It's November 4th, 2024 at 6:03 p.m. and I'm calling the Groton Board of Education special meeting to order. Just a program note, we are remote tonight as our normal meeting space is being used by the registrar to set up for voting tomorrow. We do have a quorum. We have a couple of members who will be joining late. Ian's been detained. He sends his apologies. He'll be in later. And Matthew will be joining shortly. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Superintendent Austin.
So our elementary team has worked together. They've also worked with their own teams to look at the data and examine it and tell you kind of the story of the data and share their action plans. So what I would request, though, so that it doesn't go 5 hours, if we could just have each principal be able to tell their story and go through their data. And if the board members could just jot down if they have questions, and they can ask them at the end of each of the presentations. And I think we're getting started with Christoph Anais and Catherine Kolnowski. So I'd like to turn it over to her.
Thank you. All right.
And of course, Lauren Cassini is here with us, and she is our student data manager who helps us also with all this data. So,
Hi, how are you?
thank you, Lauren.
All right, so Catherine Kolnowski is a STEAM magnet school. STEAM is STEM plus the arts. We currently have 378 students. We have one transitional kindergarten, and we are also home to the Early Learning Skills program, which the ELSP program, which is a K-5 special education program, primarily for students with multiple disabilities. As you can see, we're 52% free and reduced lunch. That says 14% special education, but I checked today and we're 16% special education. We expect to be 18% special ed in the next 4 or 5 weeks. We have some students that are looking like they'll probably qualify that are in the process right now. You can see our chronic absenteeism rate has dropped significantly over the last 3 years. In addition to the regular Groton curriculum, our students have guaranteed experiences K-5 in engineering, computer science and coding, robotics, and maker education. We have a piano lab and strings where we incorporate piano and strings into our curriculum, actually using a math approach in piano. We have our Lego robotics team and a drone team, and our primary partner is the Connecticut Science Center, but we also have partnerships with Project O and NESS. Next slide. There we go. So this is our SBAC data from last year. And as you can see, it almost breaks down into quartiles, slightly off. Our ELA performance was a little bit higher than our math performance overall, which was not a surprise. We anticipated that it would be like that. If you look at our ELA performance, you'll notice it does increase with each grade. And when we look at this, we also look at rough cohorts. This was last year's grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5, but we look at, for our grade 4 and grade 5, how our students had done in previous years. And our students are showing improvement and increases, particularly in the meets or exceeds category from year to year, which is what we want to see. We're particularly happy with our 5th grade ELA performance, with 68% of our students meeting or exceeding. This shows you our high needs subgroups of special education and our economically disadvantaged. One thing that we are proud of is that our economically disadvantaged rates pretty closely reflect our overall rates in the school. That had not always been the case at Catherine Kolnaski, and we've done a lot of work over the years to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our economically disadvantaged students. And this has shown tremendous growth for us. Our math scores a little lower than our ELA scores, but with the exception of our fourth grade, still, third and fifth breaking down almost into quartiles. And our high needs subgroups, again, pretty reflective of our overall, for the economically disadvantaged, our overall performance. We were very happy with the performance of our fifth graders on the next generation science standards, with 67% of our students meeting or exceeding the standard. If you were to look at this and go back and look at our ELA scores, you'll see that the scores on the next generation science standards are very similar to the scores in English language arts. And while the students do need to have an understanding of science concepts and the science practices to be successful on the next generation science standards test, it is a very reading heavy test. And we have found over the years that our science scores very much are in compared to our ELA scores, because it is such a reading heavy test. We also look at our school culture and climate survey data. In the box on the left, last year we had set a goal. For a couple of years, we had worked on identifying adults who can help them. And we had made great gains. We let that goal go for 1 year and moved on to a different goal. And we saw an immediate drop in that goal. So we brought it back last year as one of our goals, and also to increase the feelings of belonging. Overall, we made minimal growth in those areas. Our scores stayed somewhat, though we did see an increase in our upper elementary students for If I'm Upset. We had a lot of discussion around that. There was a change in the wording of that particular question from the prior year to last year. So we're not sure how that impacted the feelings, but you'll see that the feeling like I'm belonging, we included in this year's goal. And looking at last year's climate survey, the things that we were really happy about was 96% of our students expressed positive feelings about our school, 99% saying that they have friends, 93% positive about what they're learning in our school. 96% of our staff feel that our staff respects all colleagues, regardless of their ethnicity, culture, or diversity. 100% feel that our building fosters an appreciation of student diversity and respect for others. And 90% of our staff feel they belong. So our goals for this coming year are to increase those feelings of belonging for both students and staff. We're also working on our whole school integration of our second step, which is our SEL curriculum, incorporating those strategies more into our school culture, taking those strategies and that terminology and aligning it with what we already do. And increasing the understanding of our school procedures to address student behavior. That did come up as a slightly lower area in our staff survey. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands what the procedures are for addressing student behavior. So overall, our action plan, we always set an area of focus for ELA, math, science, our social emotional learning, and a whole school goal. In ELA, math, and science, this year we stayed simple, particularly because of the changes in ELA, for increasing our students' performance. Our SEL is that whole school integration of second step. our SEL goal, and our whole school goal is expanding the use of accountable talk. That's been our goal, our whole school goal for the 2 previous years. This will be our 3rd year. And we are finding that that fact that we did it the 2 previous years, that accountable talk is a big part of the new Wit and Wisdom program. And our students are very ready for that because we've already been working on it. So we want to make sure that we expand our use in math, science, and to the Wit and Wisdom strategies. So we'll be implementing our Wit and Wisdom with a real focus on those discourse strategies and using the DIBELS data for our small group instruction, implementing some effective strategies to improve our math fact fluency while staying within the expectations of our curriculum and the Common Core, really building in that accountable talk and math, mostly by looking at thinking classrooms, continuing our use of science notebooks, making sure that our students are using models to share their science thinking, which we feel had a nice impact on our science scores, and also building in that accountable talk using the science models that were provided in PD through the Connecticut Science Center. We're looking to implement SEL Tuesdays. They're community-based days, 2 to 4 times a year. And we're really looking at refining our MTSS process. Used to be called the SRBI process, that process of identifying our students for more intensive supports and interventions. Over the years, we've had some changes in our curriculum, our universal screeners, our SEL practices, even the technology that we use to share scores and information. And so it's time for us to bring our whole MTSS process up to date with everything that we're currently doing. And so that's my presentation for Catherine Kolnaski.
Is that rolling right into me, I think?
Yes, was this where you wanted to stop and answer some questions, Susan, from the board?
Yeah, did any board members have questions? I'm going to recognize Adrian.
All right, sorry, I was just trying to get my technology going there. So I'm going to just ask a question I asked last week. Do you feel your school's on track to reach 75 in the school performance index by 2030?
By 2030.
Which I think is the goal of the district. And Susan, please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
It's the State Department goal for all schools is the
Right.
75.
Correct. So we're
And-
included, right?
Right. And it originally was 2030. It was actually originally 2025 when they first started out, and they bumped it out to 2030. So 5 more years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
given what we've seen, the trends we've seen the last few years, and you know, do you feel that you? So I mean, what I'm going to follow up with this is it doesn't seem like there's been enough trajectory upwards to reach that, and my question is, what do you feel you need to reach that goal? Resources, staff, or other assistance by the board?
So I'm going to say there's so many pieces to whether or not we could even come close to that target. I'm going to say it's really difficult to say with ELA because we're just implementing a new curriculum. And so I think it's going to take us 2 or 3 years to really see the impact of that curriculum on our students' learning. So it's hard for me to say how that trajectory in ELA will change. In our math scores, we had, I believe that we had tremendous growth in our students when we're looking at, we look at all of these scores, but really one of the more important pieces that we look at that's difficult to present here is our student growth. And we look at the growth that our students made, and our students made tremendous growth in math this past year. And I believe it's one of the highest growth rates among the elementary schools. And I think one of the reasons for that is because we've been very consistent with our math curriculum and our math resources. So we've gotten to a point where we understand the strengths of our math resources and their weaknesses, because every resource that you use has strengths and weaknesses. And now we're able to fill in those weak areas because we know what they are, where the program that we're using teaches math concepts really well, and where, we might need to make some adjustments. So our math scores and our students' progress in math, while those scores look lower than ELA, our kids are making great growth. Honestly, not sure that I'd hit 75%, but I expect to see tremendous growth if we're staying the course with math.
Well, and the DPI is not a percentage, it's the 75 marker number that they're looking for, like in all categories, right? And except for, looking for 5% growth in absenteeism kind of thing.
Yep. So, it's difficult, to say if we would hit that target based on what we have curriculum wise. I think what we need is we really rely on our tutors to provide intervention supports. It's a heavy lift meeting the needs of all of the students, and that tutor support is so critical to our students who are struggling to meet the standard, to fill their gaps and actually make the amount of growth that they need to meet the target. And so, as much support as we can have for our tutors, and that continued time for people to come together and work on curriculum together and planning together, so that we're using our resources in the best way possible to help our students make growth.
All right. And then, so do you feel like you have enough certified staff or an adequate amount of certified staff in those support roles? So staff like reading interventionists or math interventionists to support kids. So I'm guessing there's not, how many of those kind of support staff do you have that are actually certified?
I have one reading specialist and two reading interventionists in my building, and one math specialist. So
What's the
that's
difference between an interventionist and a specialist?
the specialist works. She can provide intervention, but she works more in a coaching role to help our teachers with the tier 1 instruction in the classroom,
Yeah.
and helping them learn especially this year, the new Wit and Wisdom program. She does model lessons, helps answer questions, helps them understand how to, more effectively utilize the program.
Right.
Where the reading interventionists, the bulk of their day is providing intervention to students who are identified having gaps in.
Yeah. So does tier 2, are children identified for tier 2? Because I would assume that a lot of the kids in the kind of the approaching category would be tier 2 intervention and just getting additional support outside of the classroom or even in the classroom, correct?
Right. We have students who are identified for tier 2 and for tier 3 interventions. The difference just being how intensive or how frequently they meet with somebody. So a tier 2 student may receive some reading intervention 2 or 3 days a week, where a tier 3 student will receive intervention 5 days a week.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, I would just like to encourage you that if you feel that you need more resources, please let us know. If there are things that we need to support you with, we would like to know about that. Whether we can afford them or not is a separate issue. But we would like to know what our principals feel like they need, and then the Board of Ed and the superintendent can wade through, where we want to allocate resources. So I appreciate all the work you do, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to recognize Mike.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I see that we've got these for all the elementary schools now, the breakout of the different high needs groups. I'm kind of on the same lines as Adrian was asking. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, okay, so we have the test results that show for students who need special education, most of them are not meeting or exceeding the standards. And it certainly seems to me some of this is that the test, even with accommodate, I assume they get accommodations during the test, it's just not well tuned to many special education students. And so maybe comment on that, but I was also just wondering, and this is not something we need an answer for tonight, but what does it look like at the state level, state average, for special education students taking each one of these tests? I've got one more question, but that's my biggie.
That's actually a very excellent question. And I know Lauren could do a deep dive and help us with that, because I always do like to look at what is the mean for the state? How close are we to that and others around us? So I think it is important to compare. So we'll take a look at that. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah,
I do
Susan,
have that information and I can send that to you with the updates from last week as well. That is one of the first things we do look at with that high needs group is how are we comparing with the state? And I know we've talked about this in the past, and we typically outperform the state level when it comes to our high needs groups. They typically outperform that state level by quite a bit.
Thank you, Lauren. I just wanted to add that the test is created with a universal design in mind. So it actually has quite a few accommodations built in for all students, not just special ed students. So there's a universal test platform that's untimed. There's also designated supports that students in tier 3 can have. And then there's specialized or, probably more comprehensive supports for students who are special education. But there's, the ELA passages can be read to students if they qualify. Again, students can take breaks. The EL students, they have built-in dictionaries in their native language. There's embedded calculators. So there's quite a few universal designs built into the tests for all students.
Thank you for that additional information. That really helps. It does seem like then if all those accommodations, the universal design is there, that I mean this isn't just a school system level or school level thing. This is probably a state and national. We probably need a lot more funding for special education to help them learn. I actually just wondered if the principal could comment on the early learning skills program. I think you said that's the only one in the school system. I was just wonder if you comment a little more about that, and does that, is that we hear about other programs having more and more need associated with them? Is that one of them that we would expect to grow? Are there the right resources? Just those are my questions along those lines.
Okay. Just to go back to your special education question for a moment, one thing that we do look at when we look at our special education scores is we always look at the growth that those students are making. Just like for our overall population, wanting to look at the amount of growth that they make is really almost more important than the actual score. We look at that for our special ed students. And on last year's test, for our students where we have growth scores, our students in special education are making growth equivalent to our overall population. So our students are, our special ed students are making great gains. They might be performing below the standard, but they are making great gains every year, including students that are making 100%, or in terms of growth scores, you can go up to 110%. We had 30, we had 4 of our students last year make 110% growth. So that's, looking at the growth of our students is really important. Going back to the ELSP program, the Early Learning Skills program, it is a district-wide program, K-5. And, in terms of, do we see the program growing? I would anticipate that it might, just because we see our other programs growing. Our ABA programs have a tremendous amount of need. So as you see those programs growing and student needs in that area, sometimes that also correlates to our program. But it's really very dependent on the students that are in the district at any given time. As with our military population, students move in and students move out at a pretty significant rate compared to other schools. And we see that in our ELSP program somewhat as well. We see that a little bit of that military transition along with our students who are regular Groton students who live here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for pointing out the importance of the growth. That really emphasizes true student individual achievement, helped by all your staff and faculty. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, next I'm going to recognize Jen and then Bev.
Hi, just one question. The chronic absenteeism trend, you're lower than our district average and then lower than the state average. What do you think you're doing in your school that may be different than what some of the other schools may be facing?
I don't really know that we're doing anything different than the other schools. We follow the Board of Ed policy on absenteeism. We, send parents letters at appropriate times when they hit certain markers for unexcused absences in a month, 10 unexcused absences in a year. We do hold our meetings with parents regarding attendance. I will say I anticipate that my chronic absenteeism number might be a little bit higher next year, just based on the absenteeism I've had at the start of this year. And, a lot of our chronic absenteeism is students with significant illness, and students who are out of the country for extended periods of time. And those are things that we have, those are the ones that you can't control. The things we can control, we use a lot of strategies to put things in place in order to improve student attendance.
Is that, I know you said you just follow this district, but Susan, maybe that's something that we could sort of look and see if there's something that's unique that maybe we can share with like the other schools, just because theirs is at 14 and I think everyone else is like 16 and higher. So, it's just, yeah.
We
And
do
it's
have
like
those
the
discussions at principals meetings, but I would also say Anne Marie Mancini is also just sent out a note about where we are in November and what that means, and to really take a look carefully at those students who would be considered chronic to date, and what are those reasons why? So we're also she and I are going to put together something for the public to send out to parents just to be paying attention to the absenteeism and knowing what chronic absenteeism is. So Rebecca Bayes has also helped us with the attendance campaign that you matter, and you can see the big banners in the school, and we really address that with our students, that it matters, and our adults. It matters that we all show up when we can. If we're sick, you need to stay home, but if you're well, we need you.
Exactly. Just like, like for the parents or guardians, right? They can't just skip work because they still need to work, just like the kids need to go to school because right now that's their job, is to go to
That's
school.
right. That's right.
So, yeah, no, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
And thanks for the presentation.
Okay, next I'll recognize Bev and then Adrian.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. I have two questions. More than 50% of your economically disadvantaged students are not meeting goal in ELA or math. Can you tell me specifically what you're doing to help these students?
Well, if you look at our overall numbers, you'll see that that's not tremendously different from our overall numbers. So we're part of what we're doing in our goal this year is really looking at that MTSS process and how we're identifying students for interventions, making sure that our students are getting those interventions, making sure that we're shoring up our tier 1 instruction.
Chris, can you tell me what are you doing different this year than you did last year? Are you doing anything different, or is it just more of the same?
Well, this year it is that whole process of looking at analyzing how we're identifying students for interventions. So we are taking a slightly different approach in looking at students who are receiving interventions, how we're tracking those students through progress monitoring, and moving students in and out of interventions. So it's, I know it might sound like it's the same thing because we've always provided interventions, but we're actually going over our whole system of looking at these students and making sure that we're not losing a student. Nobody's falling through the cracks, that we're using all of the data that we have. So our math interventions look very different this year. Our approach to reading intervention is similar to last year, but you'll see, we had nice gains in our ELA. And so we're looking at the process there, but not changing it quite as much.
Do you see a correlation between absenteeism and within the economically disadvantaged students and them not meeting goal?
There's
Go ahead.
Yeah. For most of our students that are chronically absent, there's a clear correlation, whether they're economically disadvantaged or not, clear correlation between the amount of growth that they're making every year and the fact that they're missing so many days of school. There is the occasional student that misses a lot of school and still performs at a very high level. But for the most part, our students who are chronically absent, those are the students that are making much lower growth and most of them not meeting the standard.
And does your school do anything different? What do you do to do you do like outreach to these students that are chronically absent?
Oh, we do outreach, to the families. We begin with the letters, which we're required to send, but we also make phone calls. We've actually done home visits. We try to work with the family. Students get specialized plans. We've taken put in place some creative strategies to improve students' attendance, including looking at the transportation piece for some of our students and their parental involvement in the school, getting a parent more involved in the school also seems to help improve student attendance. But there are some students where their chronic absenteeism is for some very intense and understandably difficult situations. And we provide as much support as we can, but in all honesty, there's just some situations that we have limited control over, and it's just going to take time to improve that.
Okay. My other question is, your theme and theme-related opportunities, are they grade specific?
The work that the students are doing is grade specific, but the opportunity, like robotics, is K to 5. Now, what happens in robotics K to 5 changes every year, and increases in the students need to, the type of input that they're using to make their robots work. We start with dash and dot robots at the kindergarten level, which are, working with iPads, going right up to Lego robotics, where students use, have to program the robot and have different features that they can utilize, including distance and numbers of rotations and, color codes. So it expands as and increases in its sophistication as the students move through. All of the engineering is connected to science topics. So we use the same engineering design process throughout the school, but the engineering units are connected with the science that they're learning. So every grade level has different engineering projects. The computer science, like the robotics, grows, and then there are special opportunities as students get older, and their thinking is a little more complex. We have the 3D printers, the drone club, the Lego robotics. Those are pretty grade specific because our younger students aren't ready for 3D design.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
Okay, and Adrian.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just went on the school report card, and it looks like in science your school is at 76.5 for the school performance index. So I guess we can check that box compared to the district average of 62. And in math, we're 65, and ELA 70. And both of those are about 5 points over the district average. So maybe we don't have quite as far to go, but we're still looking for how we're going to get there. I just wanted to kind of say that because the numbers are a little bit different the way this is calculated than just meeting or exceeding goals. So great job with that, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for pointing that out, Adrian. And again, thank you, Chris. Thanks for coming out. Sorry for the last minute venue change, but we appreciate you coming out and discussing everything that's going on in your school.
Thank you. Thank you for all your support, and I appreciate the venue change. Saves me my drive home after the meeting.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Next up, looks like Mr. Danner.
All right, good evening, everyone. I also appreciate the venue change. Chris has about 10 minutes longer to drive than I do, I think, so all good. So quick overview. I always tend to say that we've got 350 students at our school. Our numbers go up and down like crazy. As part of our daily announcements, we're always saying who's joining the school and who's moving on and traveling somewhere else, and we say where they're going. So I average about 350 is what I say. That says 340, but that's pretty good. Our special programming, we have the grade 4 and 5 academy. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the academy, but it's really related around behaviors. It's a district-wide program, so we'll take some of the more intense behaviors from the other schools that are in grades 4 and 5 and bring them to our school. It has a designated special ed teacher and a social worker, along with several paraprofessionals that work in the program. And we integrate them into the classroom as much as possible. They're part of our community. Quite often when they graduate out of the academy, which is the goal, that's what we want, we do our best to keep them right at the school because that's where all their friend base is at that point. So that's our special programming that we have. We do not have a TK. Our makeup right there, it says it right in front of you, almost 50% free and reduced. I don't know who all those students are because that information is not really shared with us. I'm sure I could do some digging and find it, but it's not really relevant to some of the stuff that we're doing. 20% special ed, and actually I'll address that 2% ELL. I had those bars taken off our graph because it was such a small percentage of students. When the state reports, if it's less than a certain percentage, they don't report that. You just get the general number. So I had those taken off because I didn't want to call anyone out. Similar to what Chris said, although I guess her percentage is a little bit better than ours is, we have gone down over time, especially coming out of COVID, and want that to continue to go down. I mean, the goal would be obviously whatever, less than 5, or get it right down to 0 or whatever. I did have a conversation with our assistant principal a couple days ago about that 17.9%. She didn't seem to think that that number was what we thought it was. So we're going to look into that, but that's okay. It's in that general range. At least it's gone down over time. And our theme related opportunities, we are the Discovery Magnet School. I put that clusters in parentheses because we spend a big chunk of our time working on that, and we changed that in our schedule this year. We have 40 minutes designated now each week to letting kids in grades 2 through 5 select a topic of interest to them based off what teachers offer. We basically shut the building down. There's no special ed, there's no intervention, there's no specials, there's nothing else. And children get to choose something that they're interested in, something they're passionate about, and move in that direction and learn a little bit more about it and do a presentation at the end if they feel like it. If not, we invite the parents in. So we've got that. K and 1 do something similar, but they tend to stick with their classes. This year, though, they branched out. Grade 1 is swapping the classes, and they're taking different teachers, but they're traveling as a class. So all nice. We have expanded into Denison Pequot. That's a partnership that Ben Moon has helped us establish. And what we're doing with them is we're getting, I got my notes around here somewhere. We have a couple of trips planned for each grade level that they can choose. We have some PD coming into the building at some point. That PD is going to be for teachers to be more confident and comfortable taking kids out into the woods behind our school. And they're also going to offer a family night. Not sure how that's going to work yet, but we're working on that. And then we also partner with the Playmaker Project that's formerly called Life is Good. If you've heard me talk about that before, but they've changed their name. One of the things we did was we had a speaker come in at the beginning of this year, and that's kind of the SEL program that we talk about our superpowers each month. And maybe moving on. All right, so our overall scores, I feel like they're kind of split in half here. Our math looks to be about the same as the ELA for meets and exceeds. We do want to talk about the fact that we're moving into a new program here, the Share ELA. I'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about our plan. It seems to be split pretty close across the board there. Those are the numbers. Want to move to the next one?
So this one is by grade level.
Oh, did I move it?
Yellow.
Sorry, did it not see? Oh, sorry, I missed that.
That's all right.
Nope, sorry, I didn't see that yet. That's by grade level. That's my fault. Yeah, so we're looking, I think the majority of our time we spend our CST process, our child study team. That process, we're looking a lot at that approaching. We spent some time talking about that. That's not all of the students that we're talking about, but that approaching group is a group that we like to talk about. They're not high needs necessarily in each of those grades. Some of them can be, some of them might not be. Some of them might be in the meets or exceeding category, but that approaching group, we really want to focus on that group, moving them across that yellow band. I know Chris kind of hinted at it that when she was talking, they could be very low on that approaching band and still show growth and still be in that yellow band. So the number would stay the same, but we're moving that growth. So it's hard to see, she said it nicely, it's hard to see the growth of individual students when we look at the whole numbers, but that's really what we're looking for. So these are the overall numbers as far as ELA goes. Sorry, I missed that one. Like I mentioned, I had the ELL students taken out of this category. Our special ed, they have some very specific plans, but I do like to see that green and that yellow in that special ed. That could be for any particular reason. You know, they might have a speech disability or something along those lines, but they're able to perform in ELA, which we like. I'd like to see the red bar go down some, but still pretty pleased that we've got some of that yellow and the green in there. And I feel like our economically disadvantaged group, even though I can't identify all of them, that matches our district pretty well across the board. It was very similar to that. So math, our numbers are pretty good in math. We liked some of those numbers. We were pretty pleased to celebrate some of that. We've got, if you look at that, we're closing in on 60% in just about every grade level. As far as the meets and exceeds goes. Again, though, I think our focus would still be on that does not meet and approaching group. We want that group to be able to move forward, but we were pretty pleased with the math performance as far as that goes. Similar thing, high needs groups and economically disadvantaged. Again, we had the same number of students. I think we only had 2 in our group, so we had those taken out. Very similar. Economically disadvantages. This one is not as quarterly driven as the other one was, but still not too bad. And same thing, I still like to see that red, yellow, and blue in there. There's a little bit of blue in that special education, so I like to see that as well. And our science scores, I mean, that's pretty much, if you can say it can be split in half, that's half right there, 50-50. Not too bad. I want to echo what Chris said. I find that the science, if you ever take a look at that, the science is an enormous amount of reading and manipulating and looking at the screen. It's a tough test. I organize the SBAC in our school, and I kind of sit in the hallway while the kids are in their classroom for a couple of days, but then I do all the makeup. So I'm able to walk around and see all of these tests as they're making them up and take a look at the intensity of what they're doing. It takes quite a bit. So not bad with our science. Our culture and climate survey, I've got a couple of things on here. I know we sent this out. We spent time the previous year working through discipline and more consistency. There were quite a few comments about when something happens in school, how it was responded to or how the communication was. So we spent quite a bit of time last year talking about that. Turns out I spent a lot of time with our SEL tutor and doing some reading and working on restorative practices, which was very good for us. But then our survey last year came back and we weren't doing a good enough job communicating that to the classroom teachers or the specialist teachers or whoever it might be that needed to do that. So we have that fine line. So we're going to take that next step this year in working through that restorative practices piece and continuing with the groups. We had some successes with it, which was very nice, but we also want to make sure that we communicate that to the teacher. We seem to do pretty well communicating with the parent and doing things with the group, but we need to take that next step. So that's one thing we're going to focus on. We brought in, for staff, we brought in the chief playmaker this year for a speaker at the beginning of the year. I know Mystic, I don't know if he mentioned it when he was speaking, but we brought that in as well. He spoke to us for about an hour and we included all the paraprofessionals and tutors, everyone that was available on that day. It was nice. He left us with 5 things. Come to play, practice sawabona, it just means I see you. Choose optimism, remember your why, and to take care of each other. So he left us with those 5 things after speaking, and the response for that was pretty good. So those are our superpowers that we talk about. each month with the students, and he came and talked to us about that. So that was in response to building that culture and climate. We did restructure our committees. Oh, moving right on. So, nope, going back. So we restructured our committees. We've got a magnet committee that's up and running and led by Cheryl. She does a nice job with that. She works also at CK. We started a discipline committee in response to that culture and climate, and the rest of them remain. The one thing we did do this year is we have some co-chairs to keep agendas going and meetings scheduled and on a regular basis. I can't imagine I'm the only one, but every once in a while, as years go by, you know, the longer the year goes and the more things that come up, committees tend to fall by the wayside because there's not always time for them. So we've got them up and running and on a consistent basis this year. So we like that. For students, we spend a lot of time on trusted adults. We have done that for a couple of years and we're taking that next step. I'll talk about that in that next slide. And the parent survey we had didn't seem to be too bad, but it's evident through that and through the PTO that they want more involvement in the school and more activities to do with the children during the day. All right. Our focus is obviously, like everyone else, wit and wisdom, and continuing that work with UFly. That last year, we're modeling the same process with the specialists. I know Chris hinted at that. With the specialists going in the classroom, doing some lessons, observing, seeing other classrooms, taking ideas back. That model with the phonics worked well, and I'm hoping that that's going to work well with the wit and wisdom as well. We are, let's see what else we got here. We have got our some school-wide trends there that we noticed with SBAC, and we're trying to correlate those with the DIBELS as best as we can. Our CST process, I know it says it, should say it a little bit further down in the rationale, but our CST process is being revised. We have Mari Wrightington working with us, and we actually asked Lauren to come in and do some stuff with growth and SBAC. So we have quite a few things going with the CST process. That is, when you look at those slides as the whole school and you just look at those big numbers, the individual process with individual students is where you get your gains because you're focusing on what each individual student needs. You'll have an interventionist, you'll have a tutor, you'll have the teacher, Mrs. Post is in there, all of those people, whatever it's going to be, they're in those meetings and talking about just that child versus the whole group or the whole grade. We'll continue to use interims for instruction, and we've already started that with our ELA and using them as a teaching tool. The teacher will talk about them and show them how to do it. Fluency is a huge focus for math this year. It's during math or during WIN. We have Dreambox and grade level reflections and meetings and talking about those goals for students. Again, it's on individual basis and using the interims for instruction. I did add in there the specials team as far as interims go. I am going to train our PE teacher, our art teacher, the music teachers to give the SBAC test because last year we had so many students that had individual settings. We almost ran out of adults to be able to administer the test. So everybody's going to be involved with that. For the younger grades, K and 1, we're working on counting and number sense. And we're actually using some trained volunteers. We have volunteers that volunteer in the building and we're training them to do some of that work with the students in the hallway or in the back of the room. And we share that with families. And the focus is on fluency and we're doing it through games. The math specialist has gone in, showed every grade level at least a couple of games, and then she's going to rotate that based off the topic that we're talking about. For SEL, we're focusing on DESA this year, identifying that trusted adult. I had kind of mentioned that before, and we're going to be doing DESA lessons this year. We have a second SEL tutor that was supposed to start today, but we didn't have students today, so that didn't happen. So we've got the SEL team that will be working on that and individual lessons with small groups. And they're going to start working on pushing into the classroom and doing whole group lessons based off need if something pops up. Because at any point, something can come up and something might need to be done. We're expanding our magnet. I already kind of hinted at that. And the mystery science, I heard a question earlier asked, so I'll address that now. If we want support, I had to buy Mystery Science out of our budget this year to supplement everything, but so far that has been going well, and the reviews have been good. So I want to make sure that's in there next year, and we will continue with that NGSS interim. All that's based off our staffing and our schedule, things that we've done. We've given staff voice to the schedule. We change it all around. Our 4th and 5th graders have individual schedules for specials just to save a little more time and give that back to the classroom for wit and wisdom. The scheduling was quite the project this summer. I already hinted at our CST that's on there, our SEL. I've already hinted at that. And our flexibility with staff goals. We want to make sure everyone is spending the time preparing and working and learning the new programs that we have. So I've been promoting and pushing peer coaching and professional visits to other classrooms up or down a level just to see what happened before or what happens after, or to other buildings, so that we can get out of our own classroom, coverage provided if we can. So that's a quick overview.
All right. Thank you, Seth. Do we have any board members that have any questions? I'll recognize Adrian.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Seth, for that presentation. I've got a question. Do you separate out the military or transient students compared to the students that you've had since kindergarten or first grade?
So I can do that, but I choose not to. So as a quick answer to that, we typically have when we promote our 5th graders to Groton Middle, we have 12 or 15 students that have been here since kindergarten. So like that's on average what we would have. So we don't separate it out because they're on a 3-year rotating basis. And if we start with, let's say, 60 kids in kindergarten for 3 classes, by the time they get to 5th grade, there's only somewhere between 12 and 15 of those same children left as far as a cohort goes. So when you talk cohort about our school, cohorts at our school can be tricky. I hope that
Adrian,
answers that.
I can answer that. We are on our 8th DODEA grant, and in every grant, we are setting goals and we're looking at military versus non-military. And we look for all children. So that grant goes for all kids, right? But we do a deep dive to see the students who are military and non-military, and the results have been pretty stunning, pretty positive. So it's not usually, typically with transiency, you don't see the kind of growth that we've seen for our military kids. But even though it's a short time, and we look at how they are succeeding, and usually they show that they're as successful as anyone else. So, but it is something we paid attention to as a district because of the grants and because of our population. But it is important to keep paying attention to it.
We have talked about that before and brought it up. I guess I looked at that in a different way, but yes, the military students can perform, even though all the moves and things, the consistency of how we transfer students and the bases that they come from and the bases that they go to and the communication that we have, that does help them out. Because there are some, even though it seems inconsistent to many of us, there is some consistency in what they do.
Yeah, it would just be it would be interesting to know specifically. I mean, maybe your school isn't the best. Maybe we need to do this by a district because you're overly military compared to our district. And maybe looking at Thames River where there's, a little bit more of a balance. But I know I've watched some stuff on structured literacy. And this was a town in Pennsylvania probably 10 years ago. They were doing this, but they were separating out the military connected or the transient kids from the kids that had started in the program to help judge the success of the full, that was the reading program, and how well they were doing. And then also looking at the military kids to see if we're doing well enough with them, given that, we've only got them for whatever it is, 2 to 4 years or something like that. So I thought that was interesting that a different district did that, and was just wondering, how if we relate to that type of thing. So that being said, how many certified sports staff do you have as far as, reading, math?
Same amount, I believe. We have one specialist in math and one specialist in reading, and we have two interventionists in reading.
And do you feel like that's enough to support all those kids that are below that?
That's a loaded
Say what you
question.
mean to say, Seth. Tell
I
the
could
truth.
always use more, but we do the best we can with the resources we have. So I'm going to try to say that as nicely as I can. We had to get remove some people from the roster last year, at the end of last year, and that was a hit. So we've had to make some changes. But as far as certified goes, we make the best with what we have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that my question is, do you feel like you need another reading specialist, or do you feel like you need having another math specialist would help increase increase your scores?
I would like to say yes. Like I would. I would like to say more tutors would help. I would like to say more into all that extra help. Like I guess the way that we divide it based off the staff that we have, and so either groups get larger or there are less times to be seen, more times for other things. I don't know how to best say that, but we make do with what we have as best as we can, and we put as many kids in that pipeline as we can. I think someone had said it earlier in one of the other meetings, like we have a big chunk of people that could use intervention, but at the same time, if we don't have enough staff to support that, we have to pick and choose which ones we get it and then alternate back and forth and rotate. So it would be nice, but that's like, was it pie in the sky, right? Like pie in the sky, like, yeah.
Well, kind of, except if students that really need extra help aren't getting it, that affects us down the line in middle school and high school, and with lower graduation rates and lots of other things, and it affects, the outcomes as adults. So I mean, it is kind of pie in the sky, but I don't know that I agree that it is. I think that we should know what the needs are. And based on the students that you have, the kids in your school, we should know what they need. And, to get everybody to get to that, that 75, school performance index or whatever, it would be nice to understand what could push us over the hump. I understand that this is a hard discussion to have in a meeting like this. But from the board standpoint, again, it would be nice to know, that, yeah, we can do this and you tell us you need this, and then Susan and the board says, we don't have the money for that. That's reasonable, but it would be nice to know exactly what you need. So,
Well, I will say that we did just get an extra SEL tutor through that most recent grant for the next 5 years. And I am very adamant that if students are ready to learn and they're socially, emotionally set to learn, they're going to do better in that sense. So even though that's not necessarily an ELA or a math tutor per se, or a certified person, it is something that helps throughout the course of the day, and an extra person to talk to that makes the learning and the environment better, because that is a big piece of what we talk about. If they're not ready to learn, it doesn't matter how many interventionists or how many specialists we have. If they're not ready to learn, they're not going to learn. So I feel like that's a step in the right direction.
yeah, and I think tutors certainly are part of the plan. I mean, I know they were cut out of the budget, a lot of them kind of late in the game last year. But if more tutors will help, I mean, our original plan before before we actually voted on the budget was to keep a bunch of tutors. So it might be nice to know, if that is the biggest bang for the buck, how many tutors do you need to kind of help fill in the gaps? So in that, I know that's going to come with a budget request later on. Maybe we can talk later about how that's presented to the board. All right,
Yeah.
but thank you for this presentation, Seth.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to recognize Jen, then Ian, then Matthew, and then Mike.
Seth, thank you for your presentation. I'm always like looking out for Charles Barnum. Would the f- when we're looking at the quartiles, a majority of the students fall into the first and second quartile, unfortunately. Would you say that the students that are transferring into Charles Barnum, you basically said they rotate every 3 years, um, are they always tending to be behind based on like our set standards of where they should be? And most of the students we get, we're always on catch-up mode. And maybe we will never get up to 75 because we're always trying to catch up. And if that is the case, do we disproportionately invest more in Charles Barnum with some of our DODEA funds to make sure that the military kids who these fundings are basically generated for should get like extra services that may be currently being shared throughout the district. I don't want our military students, when they come to Groton or when they leave Groton, to be the weakest link in the supply of schools that they're going to. So obviously you're going to probably say like, yes, give me more funding. But going back to my first question, do you think that like when the kids are coming to you, like you're always behind the 8 ball and you always need to like bring them up to speed?
Well, the simple answer to that is no. I don't
Okay.
feel that way. We have a wide range of students that come in. So
Mhm.
there will be some that are behind, but there are some that are doing fine and right on par, and there are some that jump right in and roll right in. So it's a range. It depends on their experience, what they're bringing with them, where they've been, a variety of different places and factors. And even we can have students from the same district come, and some are ahead and some are behind. So no, I don't feel that way when they come in for sure. And we push them as far as we can. I know a lot of this is conversation about the scores and things like that, but we take them where they're at and we get them as far ahead as we possibly can and either catch them up or push them ahead, and then send them on their way as best as possible. But I don't feel like that transient population comes from behind or ahead. It's all about the individual student.
Okay. Great. Oh, and last, not related to your presentation, but like when we went to the school visit, the basketball hoop was backed into. Is that now fixed for the kids? It's like been a year, I think, since I came.
The basketball hoop works.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, next, I'll recognize Ian, then Matthew, then Mike.
Thank you, Jay. First, I apologize for coming in late. Had some other pressing concerns to deal with, but I was tracking much of the conversation. I reviewed the packet closely. Appreciate the presentation, and I'm not going to reiterate the points, but I will align my comments generally with Adrian and Jen, and I appreciate their input on this. Much akin to like what I commented on last week with the other data presentations, I think there's great value in having multiple lenses through which we look at the data. And the idea of trying to capture progressions and progression towards mastery. And yeah, I can appreciate like the idea of, separating out in some ways to kind of look at the long term versus, short term. If we're trying to gauge curriculum benefits that we're investing in for structured literacy or science based approaches to reading, that is something that we do need to look at over time. So there would be value in separating out the long timers versus the short timers in that. If we're looking at progression towards mastery, well, then that's, sort of a more individual basis, as Seth was talking about there. So, I think, looking at multiple lenses is always a good approach. And, I appreciate all the efforts. And, I think as we're moving towards budget season, I think it's important to keep in mind, I mean, we are looking to, we need to know what the ideal state is, understandably understanding clearly that it's probably not going to be attainable. Or if it was attainable, it would cost, a lot. But, having a goal to aspire for, would be good just to have us, as a board, so that we could understand better, like what it is, where the need is the most identified by the ground level people that are delivering the services. So whatever that is, I mean, please do send it to us, like, in the idealized state, and let us start working towards it. I mean, we've made a number of moves as a board, creating a non-lapsing fund and various other, we're looking at restructuring how we approach the budget altogether. And, prioritize the budget and planning the budget, so having a good sense of like the full context of like what the ideal state would be, I mean, if that's talking about more teachers, more certified staff, more SEL tutors, more math tutors, or, more classrooms. If we're looking at that, a different teacher to student ratio as a goal, and then maybe a smaller ratio, to create, take a very scientific clinical approach towards trying to get to the idealized state, and then, see how that goes. Have something, the best case scenario to work from, or work towards, I should say. And, we go from there, because, again, like also as we look at the budget year after year, we're looking at ways to be more efficient in some areas so we can be more effective in others. So I'll just say that, and I would encourage you to be as frank, honest, and idealist as possible when it comes to the budget asks. And that goes for, everyone that comes and presents before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. I agree. Multiple lenses is a good way to look at things. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And now I will recognize Matthew.
Thank you very much, Jay. Seth, I guess I'm speaking to you, but I'm also speaking to your colleagues. And, I visited all the schools over the last number of years, and I've had a chance to interact with faculty. And our system is a really fine system, given all the constraints we face. And yet, there are some things. It's kind of like music. You need to hear the sound between the notes in order to fully appreciate the notes. And some of the sound between the notes in what we're talking about tonight is the complexity of balancing mastery versus growth, academic outcomes, the achievement gap, absenteeism. It's a very complex package. And what I have not heard is an integrated program that seeks to set some metrics of what we want our outcomes to be, and whether it's a 3-year or a 7-year, whatever that package is, that's beyond my pay grade. But to have a timeline where we say, these are some of the things we want to accomplish, and here are the waypoints that we're going to measure ourselves by along this process. For example, I've listened to the focus both at the secondary and now the primary level about focusing on those approaching and meeting. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I know in my heart of hearts that does not mean not paying attention to the lowest quartile, but I've not heard it articulated as to how we're going to deal with the lowest quartile. And I would like to hear that at some point. Pre-COVID, our absenteeism in the district was 12.6%. That's based on the portion of the year before we ceased in-person instruction in 1920. And we've come down. We've really come down 37.5%, 28.4, 21.8, now 18.8. But we're still about 40% or more above where we were before. So again, I'd like us to hear what the plan is going to be a real plan, not just talk about it, but a real plan with some longitudinal goals and waypoints. And, keep on doing what you're doing. And let's think a little additionally as to have this plan. Maybe you said it and I missed it, but I haven't heard it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Matthew, I'd like to add that really the plans start with the strategic plan for the district, and Anne Marie and I have big plans on revitalizing that. We've had it, it's sustained us. We've done some great work under it, but we will be moving towards kind of looking at the data and making a new plan for the district. This plan kind of comes to its kind of finale 2025, and we want to take it. And then from the strategic district plan comes the school improvement plans and their plans. So what we've given you here is kind of the action planning around what they've seen in the data. So this is kind of a succinct picture of what are some of our focus areas for this next year coming up. But in those other plans, they really do extend over a couple years. So we can be talking about that. And we've talked a lot, the board and I, about setting board goals around what those district goals are so that we're all aligned. So I know you know that.
And I appreciate, again, it's a very complex,
Yes.
many moving parts.
Yep.
I'm just hoping that as our principals at every level come with their budgets, that that they take a longer term view and say, in a perfect world, we want A through Q, but right now we're asking through A for D as a basis on which to go on to Q in future years. Give us a broad picture as long with the specifics, metrics, waypoints. I think that will be helpful for the board, and I think it'll be helpful for the schools. It'll be most of all helpful for the children. Again,
Thank you. It's much appreciated, Matthew, the support that we hear from the board. It's really very much appreciated.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Seth. We appreciate your coming out.
Oh, I
Right.
still have a question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see any other hands up.
Oh, it was up before, but it went down.
Oh, all right. Go ahead, Mike.
Actually, first a statement. I do think it's really important that, at least as a school district, that we break out between, according to military family status, these scores in general, and it's doable. I looked it up at CT.gov Ed site, and I'll just say generally, the military families, the students of military families are, in terms of meeting or exceeding standards, are outperforming non-military families. So for ELA, students in military families, 60% are getting that meet or exceed, as opposed to the rest of the population is 48%. For math, 51% is meeting or exceeding for a military family student. For non-military family, it's 39%. So I gotta say, it just, according to the numbers, this is just saying something in these test scores that we see in many ways, that there's exceptionalism within military families, and a drive to succeed. And so I think that's really, as a district level, very helpful to point out, but
Yeah.
maybe not as a school level.
So Mike, that's what I was saying in the 10 years I've been here with the 9 DODEA grants. That's exactly what we've seen. And before I got here, Dr. Mitchell was seeing that. So it's absolutely a testimony, even with the transiency in a submarine force, for instance, 8 schools in 12 years, you know the story, that it really does, it's a testimony that they really have done well. And in our own district, in 5 years, Seth School was one of the first, Charles Barnum, to receive a blue ribbon. And when you receive a blue ribbon, you have to write this paper and you have to talk about, so why did you receive this? What do you think is happening? And then, just 5 years later, Pleasant Valley, which those students moved to Thames River, received the blue ribbon. And the one story I hear that's true is that our teachers have been very acclimated and have had the professional development around getting to know kids really quickly, assessing their needs, and being able to get right to it. So it's a testimony to our staff and our teachers and our parents and our admin who are all working with these families. But thank you for bringing that up because it's exactly what we've seen.
Can I just add to that? Like, I think that part of that is this presentation is all big numbers, the whole school, the whole district, however you want to look at that, right? But when it comes to the school, we're looking at the individual students, and that's not really part of what this presentation is. And that's where we get the bang for our buck. Is that right, Susan? Like, we're looking at the CST process and getting to know kids as soon as they come in, the transitions in, and then looking at their data, assessing them right away, the individual stuff, which we don't present about as in a whole group.
Did you have anything else, Mike?
No, I thank you for both answers. I just at some point I'd like to see our district or town come up with a plan to get a new physical school for Charles Barnum, bring him up to the 21st century standards.
Just one that has power.
This is the second year we've had to close the school for a day because of the power, and it wasn't anybody's fault except for the electric company not getting there in time and fixing it, but they did finally.
Technically it was a squirrel.
Oh no.
Then consistently 20th century standards, but you can't plan for squirrels. Thank you.
I agree though, Mike.
Okay.
You can't euthanize them.
Adrian has another question.
Yeah, a quick question. Yeah, I'm guessing the squirrel took care of himself there, but do we know, like what Mike was saying, with that the military kids are actually doing really well. It would be interesting to know where those kids are when they get here. Or is it just that when those students get here, they are testing above average to start, and then they're leaving us that way, or they're that way a couple of years later? So it would be really interesting to see what their growth is, the military student growth, and maybe again that's something that we can look at as a district. So not just where the military kids are as far as meeting or exceeding, but what kind of growth do we have with those students? So that's just another thing that I'd kind of thought of that would be a nice way to separate out the military students, and maybe lots of them are coming from a specific district that has that's doing something great and we can learn from it. But it would be interesting to know how we're doing if the military students are growing 2 years worth of growth in 2 years time. So thank you, Phil.
I actually thought that would be good PD to visit some other military schools in other places, just to see how they do things compared to the way that we do them. That's interesting that you say that.
Yep.
Right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth, for coming out tonight. And we hope you get power back. All right, next up, Mr. Cheney, Northeast Academy.
All right, good evening, everyone. You will see here that our school enrollment says 392. We're actually up to 394. We had a couple of friends move in from Pakistan in recent weeks, so our current enrollment is up to 394. Our chronic absenteeism trend, as you'll see there in the last couple of years, we've been able to cut that nearly in half. That is a lot of work for every school building in the district, regardless of the rates. And someone asked earlier, what are you doing that's different? I really can't stress how much time and effort it takes to work with these families to get the kids into school. One of the things we've identified having a TK class at our school for the first time is we have some TK friends that are already chronically absent. And trying to work with these families to provide early education and set them up for success in future years so that when they do come to kindergarten next year, they are aware of what the policies are around truancy and chronic absenteeism. So that is one area that our attendance board is going to be working on in the coming weeks. We are an art school. Our two main partners are the Connecticut Storytelling Center and Flock Theater, both of whom are from New London. I put literacy next to the Connecticut Storytelling Center and math and science next to Flock Theater because we really try to have our arts partners lift core instruction, and we really try to make it standards based. So our resident storyteller by the name of Amy Forbes, we really have her operate in what I call literacy lane. She's really helping us to lift core instruction of wit and wisdom at the time. And Flock Theater, both Victor and Darren, we're trying to keep them in the math and science field. Celebrate the Arts is a mainstay at Northeast. It's a yearly event that happens every March. That is something I know a number of the board members have been at. This year, we have slowly started to look at adding to that experience. Shannon Weigel and Ben Moon have helped hook me up with AFL-CT, or Arts for Learning Connecticut, and working with some folks there to enhance our overall programming at Northeast, but also specifically for this year to focus on Celebrate the Arts, to bring in some new presenters. So a breakdown of our performance across grades 3, 4, and 5, ELA on top, math on bottom. We are very proud of these scores. You'll see, looking at the meets and exceeds, that a total of about 69% of our students, grades 3, 4, and 5 last year, met or exceeded the standard, which was about 14 percentage points higher than the district average. And then for math, it was 61% of those kids were meet or exceeds. Both areas are scores that we are proud of. One area that we always look at is approaching standards. You've heard that word growth used repeatedly. And we are always looking at those kids that are level 2, and not just their growth targets, but what is it going to require to get those kids over the hurdle and into the green, which is really meeting the benchmark level 3. These are our ELA scores broken down by grade. You will see here that we are off to a good start with last year's 3rd graders, who are obviously now 4th graders, with 71% of those kids meeting or exceeding. Last year's 5th grade, which is now at the middle school, they were the same, 71%. And I point that out to you because I need to reiterate what my colleagues have said, that 5th grade NGSS test is heavy on reading. And we know for the most part that good readers and good synthesizers are going to do well on that NGSS test. So you'll see how that counts later on in this presentation. Our high needs lists here, I find the economically disadvantaged to be interesting because it's about a 50-50 split in terms of who scored level 1 and 2 and who scored level 3 and 4. You will see that some of our students, top right, 13% of our special ed kids were actually a level 4. We will have kids that are hitting that mark because they may not have ELA goals in their IEP. They may be speech-only kids, or they may be kids that have math goals and really have an IEP based upon those needs specifically. Math broken down by grade level. It's very ironic that I said to you earlier, 71% of our kids in 3rd grade last year met or exceeded an ELA, and it was the same thing in math, which is not typical. So we are excited about how our 3rd graders started on the state testing last year, but also some really good scores in other grades as well, 56% in 4th grade, and then 58% in 5th grade. Similar here, looking at the economically disadvantaged kids, it's about a 50-50 split there. What you don't see here is we did not have any kids in the high need subgroups scoring at the level 4. I think historically speaking, if you've looked at data trends through Groton and also statewide, nationwide, math scores typically lag behind ELA scores. And I think that's what's represented here in this slide. We were very proud to see these scores when they came back to us. Only 2 kids scoring in the red, but also a total of 79% of our 5th graders last year met or exceeded the standard. That is the That is the highest percentage of kids at Northeast to score at that level since pre-COVID days. And I know we've looked at those trends and we've tried to get back to where we were pre-COVID times, but to see nearly 80% of our kids meeting or exceeding the standard on what personally I believe is the hardest test in elementary school, we were really, really proud of that for our teachers and for our kids. In terms of our school culture and climate survey, I think you've heard this from all of my elementary colleagues because we all focused on identifying trusted adults last year. There's a lot of research out there that really says essentially every child needs someone at school to feel connected and to feel like they have someone that they can go to when they need to. So this was a focus area last year with our social worker. And we saw a 6.7% increase for early elementary kids. So that's kindergarten, first, second grade. And then we saw an 8.8% increase for upper elementary kids. That's grades 3, 4, and 5. There was a lot to celebrate in terms of our staff survey last year. We saw big increases in those 3 middle points, working with people who treat me with respect. Staff respects all colleagues, regardless of their ethnicity, culture, or diversity, and then fostering an appreciation of student diversity. We were really pleased to see those increases because we had seen the opposite trend the year before. And then those 2 final bullet points, which is important to me as the person in charge of the building in terms of overall morale and climate. 95.6% of staff responded that they feel like they belong, and almost 98% of staff feel connected to other adults at school, which I think is wonderful. Areas of focus and the rationale really do go hand in hand. I'm a firm believer in the IABs and the FIABs, the focused interims, to help inform instruction and to drive the work in the classroom. We are trying to provide more tier 1 support with less staffing across grade levels. I know a number of folks have asked about staffing. We lost a full-time reading tutor. We lost a part-time math tutor, and we also lost our social worker, which I will talk about at the end of this. So despite those changes in staffing, we are trying to provide more tier 1 support, meaning supporting all children during their instruction that they're all getting, not tier 2 or tier 3 pullout. Universal screeners are going to be administered 3 times a year going forward in math, like we do in reading with Dibbles, to help us catch needs as they arise. In terms of reading, we're going to focus on growth for all kids by making use of the Dibbles platform to drive small group instruction. And as you all know, we've adopted Wit and Wisdom. That is a huge lift, K to 5. And our job, including our reading specialist, is to support classroom teachers in their first year of implementation. SEL is always important. Our JTS team, our Journey to Success committee, has already begun to take a look at Second Step as a potential avenue to give our SEL programming a bit of a facelift going forward. For the last handful of years, we have been using a collection of lessons and resources, many of which come from the DESA online screener that we've been doing, the online SEL screener. But I think at this point in time, we're looking for something that's a bit more explicit to meet the needs of our kids. So our action steps, we've made necessary changes to schedules and assignments. I think Seth said creating the schedule this summer was a massive lift. Classroom teachers with support will support cuspy kids in reading during the DI block, which is designated on their schedules on a daily basis. Our math specialist and math tutor will work with all grade levels to provide tier 1 support and intervention. Basically, in a 6-hour school day, we have about 6 math blocks staggered out, 45 minutes to an hour each. And between our math specialist and our 1 full-time math tutor, we are really pushing through all grade levels on a daily basis. It is a lot of work with not a lot of people. We will continue to embed SBAC questions into daily practice. Intentional and purposeful planning with our arts partners will directly correlate to tier 1 instruction. We're really excited about that. We have worked with the storyteller for a couple of years, but really her focus this year has been diving into the Wit and Wisdom manuals and helping teachers lift that instruction. Flock is new for us. They're finishing up a residency right now with first grade, focused on day and night shadows in correlation to the NGSS standards, and the kids are having an absolute blast. Fine-tuning our MTSS process, specifically in the area of student behavior, will support academic growth. That is a focus area for us. You've heard that acronym used a couple of times. I think we can all agree that good behavior can result in good learning, and we need to focus on behavior as a school. So in consultation with Mari, whose name I think you've heard a couple of times, that is going to be an ongoing focus for us. And then finally, our SEL team will continue to use the DESA data, which is that online screener, to support students in need of SEL instruction, despite losing our social worker. In terms of staffing, just to respond to a question I've heard a number of times, that was a loss for us. We shared a social worker with Seth over at Charles Barnum. They were with us for 2.5 days a week for the past couple of years, and that is a position we no longer have. And that is a detriment to our school community. It really forces other people to do things that they may not be totally equipped to do, and I would really like to explore the possibility of bringing that back, not just for our students, but for our families, because those people can be a huge asset to those who need support outside of school. And I will end with that.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Do we have any board members that have any questions? I'll recognize Matthew, then Adrian.
Thank you, Jay. Well, in this business of looking for the notes, the space between the notes, I've not heard anybody tonight mention DEI. Is that still, could you explain what is or is not happening with DEI and where you see it going in your respective schools?
Sure. I can tell you that we have a DEI committee at our school. We have recently been focusing in our school solely on the word of equity, what that looks like in our school. And we plan on, at the faculty meeting next Tuesday, November 12th, having some staff share their personal experiences about working in an environment that at times has felt that we need to put more of an focus on staff equity. And so that is something that we continue to keep at the forefront. I can tell you that a number of us were in attendance last week in Hartford at the Igniting Change conference, which was wonderful. The presenter there focused on justice and had, there were a number of sessions in the morning and the afternoon that really focused on equitable practices in the classroom. One that I attended that really stood out to me was Building Thinking Classrooms, which is something I know people will be attending PD on tomorrow. And there are some next steps on my end that I want to bring back to our staff to help lift instruction for all kids in the mathematical classroom.
Chris, Seth?
Sure, I'll jump in. We have our DEI committee. We meet the third Wednesday of every month. It's also a standing item on our staff meeting agenda. The DEI topics are focus. One of our focus areas this year is really tied in with our climate goal, which is that feeling of belonging. And what does that look like and sound like for our students and for our staff members, but a lot of focus on that belonging feeling for our students. We have a lot of great discussions in our DEI committee. It's they're challenging topics sometimes when we're trying to bring together an understanding and accepting that there's a lot of learning that's going on there. I was also at the Igniting Change conference with several members from our district DEI committee, and there were a lot of great, the presenter was wonderful, and it brought up a lot of great topics and conversations that we're bringing back to our building.
Thank you.
So I'll jump in real quick. Last year, we started with an equity rubric that we spread out throughout part of our faculty meetings. And the conversation led to microaggressions and staff wanting to know more about that. So I got with Jamal and did a little bit of reading with some things that he had and brought back a couple of trainings. One was for paras and tutors on microaggressions and what they are, and some information about that. And then I did the same thing with the staff. This year, at the end of last year, I reached out to Carmita Hodge and asked, it was brought up that we wanted to have people from I don't know if I'm going to say it the right way, the Black Student Union, I think that's the correct name of her group, to come down and have students speak to staff. So that's on the agenda for happening this year, along with and I don't have it in front of me now because it's at school, but there was a book put together at the middle school for response to things, and we used it already this year for the N-word that had come up in school. So we although that was not part of SBAC data, we continue to move forward with that.
Thank you all so very much.
All right, thank you. So next I'll recognize Adrian, then Ian, and then Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for that, for the presentation. I'm going to ask you the same question. How much, as far as ELA and math support staff, how many do you have in your school?
I have 1 reading specialist, 2 reading interventionists. I have 1 math specialist and a full-time math tutor.
Yeah, so not in regards to your school, but in regards to the district in general. I mean, because your district obviously, or your school is obviously like the top performing elementary school, and there's probably reasons for it that come to like, percentage of high needs children and some other things, and the fact that your staff is doing a fantastic job. Maybe that one first, but I guess I'm curious from the district standpoint, and maybe this would be for Susan, and maybe we can talk about it later, but some of the schools that really do have like more disadvantaged children, and that's mirroring through in some of the scores. Should we have more reading interventionists or math specialists in those schools? Because we see, Seth's school that doesn't have quite the needs has the same amount of staff looking at numbers. And I don't know about the tutor, if the other schools have the math tutor. But should we, or Ryan, sorry if I just called you Seth, but Ryan, I am in no way saying that we should take anybody away from you, but maybe that's something that we should look at as a district, allocating towards more support staff, to try to just bring some equity with the needs of the different schools.
We've actually been doing that, Adrian, with some of the grants we've received, especially the DODIAs. I know that Seth just mentioned receiving an SEL tutor. We also had a grant where we were able to add tutors to CK, Thames River, and Mystic River. And you heard from Steve, Mystic River does have a lot of needs in that school. So really staying very conscientious, and I would love to be able to share that with the board, because it's a real big responsibility for everyone in the building and for all of us. Like, how do we make sure that those resources are provided? And we just see the numbers keep growing, especially in special education. So that comes with additional teachers, and we'll need space. So.
Yeah, I guess I mean, it's great that we have grant funded positions, but it seems like these districts or these schools have long-term needs, like the economic status of Thames River is not going to change significantly. So maybe we need to allocate resources to try to meet the needs of those schools in
Great. It
budgeted
has to be a
resources and
balance. It
not.
has to have operations too.
Well, I'm just saying maybe those schools need to share or have additional reading or math support staff to try to bring up the imbalance in our district between, the schools that have higher needs. So I mean, that's something that we can talk about as we come into, into the budgeting season, but
Right.
that's just, that's just my thought here. So thank you.
Adrian, if I may jump in for a second, what you're implying with the allocation, really looking at that closely, we've begun to do a lot of that work, especially over the summer, looking at each of the elementary schools and what resources are allocated, and how they're performing, right, according to their needs. There's a great tool that the state has recently put out that we've been exploring. There are still questions that it almost generates more questions than answers at this point, but I am working with the state on trying to get some of those answers so we can understand and make sense of how those resources are allocated and what to do about it. So to your point, it is a good exercise, and there is a tool that's now available that we're trying to use to make more sense of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It seems like without a tool, though, we can say that there's real need in a couple of schools, and we will. I mean, I imagine that every principal would say, if you gave me another reading specialist, I will be able to do better for a couple more kids. I mean, that's going to be a hard thing to obviously measure because every kid's different, but I'll be able to, like Seth was saying, I'll be able to give kids 40 minutes a day rather than 20 minutes a day because the resource is available. And it seems like there's a few schools where that is really needed. So I appreciate that. And any data that the state, if they can shed light on it, that's fantastic. And we should look at that. But thank you.
We do have a meeting with our state representative who we work with through the Alliance grant. She's coming in I believe it's 2 more weeks. So ideally we'll be having those conversations with her as well, just trying to get some answers to how to best navigate the tool to make some decisions.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now I'll recognize Ian, followed by Jen, and then Dean.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you all for thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. A couple of things. One, I'm going to reiterate a point I've made earlier, and with other schools and just in general. I can appreciate all the work that Susan has done with DODIA grants and bringing in tutors and paras underneath that kind of funding. But I think, what we're discovering, at least my understanding, my interpretation of what I'm observing is that, we're struggling with maintaining relationships in the sense of long-term relationships with students and staff. And I think one of the things we need to shift away from, and one of the things I will continue to advocate for is, I think if we identify needs over time for support staff in schools, then we need to make that investment with the budget, not with grants. Grants expire, grants, can change from time to time. I think, but what doesn't change about education is at the end of the day, whether we're using the newest software or a generation or two behind the current model, that's a side note to what is happening with the teachers, the support staff, and the students. education is dependent on relationships, and we talk about trusted adults. We talk about a lot of that has to do with just having staff that feel comfortable in belonging to the district. Then let's make that commitment. So we'll continue to advocate for shifting away from funding staff with grants and using operational budget to fund staff that we designate as needed. So again, I encourage all the principals for all the sites to give us your idealized site budgets and let us work towards that investment in the students and the staff. I want to get away from the peaks and the valleys where, you know, if we have great grants and everything's flowing, then we're hiring people, and then suddenly something might occur, and then we have to let a lot of people go. That disrupts a lot of trusted relationships between student and staff. And so that's something we have to work on.
Well, and I think you know our history, Ian, of
I
having
understand that.
1%, 0% budgets over time, which were the expectation, to
Yeah.
2%. And then when we finally worked together, all of us, you know, we were able to come up with a 7.91% budget, but it didn't include all the things we really wanted, right?
Right.
So-
So yeah, to that point, like that's why I'm asking, you know, idealized budgets, you know,
Mhm.
give us the frank, you know, because at the end of the day, the board can advocate. That's what we are here to do. We advocate for the community. We also advocate for the district. To, you know, the funding, the fiduciary, the town council. So having a very frank understanding of where we want to make the firm commitments.
Mhm.
We're talking about like investing in staff as opposed to infrastructure. You know, infrastructure can come and go. Infrastructure can kind of ride for a couple of years, depending on what it is and how imminent things are. But if we determine we need staff, and again, like, you know, we doing comparative models between schools, you know, I think it's great to, you know, look at schools that have, you know, if something's functioning well, let's see if we can, you know, what would it take to recreate that in other schools elsewhere that maybe are struggling with similar concerns. Just a quick question for you, Ryan, though. I noticed, you know, in the survey, the staff survey, it's, you know, a high percentage of staff who responded. And actually, you know, this question might go for all the principals. You know, as far as like overall, like how many staff, what percentage of staff actually responded to the survey?
I think it's usually around 2/3, Ian. I don't have that number in front of me, but I want to say it's about 2/3, give or take.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And with
I
principals-
can't, yeah, I can't tell you off the top of my head either, but I can tell you I must send several notes out to everybody saying you all have voice. Please do it. Please do it. But because we don't track the names, you don't really know who does and who doesn't. So it makes it a tricky balance. But we definitely, I'm sure I can speak for everyone. We definitely promote doing it and having voice for sure.
And it is nice because we do have the ability to look at it certified versus non-certified staff to see if there's, you know, trends among the non-certified staff that stand out to us and give us, you know, cause for concern or at least to question and dig in a little more.
All right. And Chris, would you say that's the same as well?
Typically around 2/3. Last year's was a little bit lower. I'd say last year was about 50%.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you all for what you do. And again, I encourage you all to be as frank and honest with us as you see fit, as far as like where we want to get to with the site budgets and where you think the allocations would be the most impactful for the students and the staff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next I'll recognize Jen and then Dean.
Hi, Ryan, thank you for your presentation as well. Question. There's always concern about the students that were in kindergarten, first grade, like that year of COVID. and how their scores are lower or tend to be lower from cohort, looking from grade level to grade level. It doesn't appear like that's the case here. And what do you think is different from that student body compared to the rest of the district? Do you think it's because that this magnet school is art focused and that sort of helps string them along to perform better because they're developing a different part of their brain?
Um, no, I don't necessarily believe it's attributed to our theme. I will tell you, our current fifth grade class, it'll be the first class that I've been with since kindergarten. Susan knows that I call these our pandemic kids because they were the ones that got sent out in kindergarten. They were the ones that spent first grade in hybrid, cohort A, cohort B, yada yada yada. Um, that is the largest, and Lauren, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but it's the largest cohort in the district. We have almost 80 kids in fifth grade, and I have needed to roll a teacher along and loop a teacher along every year to keep these class sizes around 18 or 19 as opposed to 26 or 27. It's something that Susan and I have needed to talk about on a yearly basis. But I will tell you, and Seth said this earlier, and he's very correct on this point. SBAC does not tell the whole story. We cannot put a ton of or all the stock into the scores that you've seen before. We have a lot of kids in our current fifth grade class in the intervention process that are receiving tier 2 or tier 3 support, specifically in the area of math. So whereas these kids may be performing well, or they did perform well on SBAC last year, and that's what you're seeing in front of you now, that doesn't mean that there are not internal concerns when you look at the big picture, because obviously we have a lot more data that we look at beyond what you're seeing, surface level in front of you tonight.
So, should we, and this is recommendation for like, as those kids transition into the middle school, as we're looking for the budget process, potentially like add staff there, because not only is it's like coming in from all of the elementary schools, and I'm afraid like the middle school is going to get bombarded, with less support. And should we just getting your guys, because you guys are ground running, should we look to transition or increase the number of staffing at the middle school to support these kids?
I don't know if that's my question to answer. I can tell
I
you
know,
having-
everyone,
I do know, having been a secondary AP for 5 years, that historically we're going to see dips in math scores when kids leave elementary school and they go to sixth grade. That's something that we've seen at the state level for a long time. But in terms of staffing, I think that is a fair question.
We need a new wing before we add more staff, Jen. That middle school needs more classrooms.
I know, but like, if these kids, I mean, it's under special circumstances, right? They're like our COVID impacted students, and we need to make sure that they at least are at base level, or at least get more support to bring them to base level. I'm just concerned as they're transitioning into the middle school, it's no longer going to be, more hand holding, but leaning more towards independence. And I'm not like necessarily sure if I feel comfortable that some of them are going to successfully transition. And that's just me listening to all of the presentations that we've had. Really concerned about the students right now that are going to be transitioning.
It hit every single grade level a different way in time. You've seen that, even
I know,
talking about it at graduation. And even for our littles who were home and didn't have a preschool experience, those children also struggled because sometimes moms and dads were working at home, and they didn't necessarily have, the peer relationships and the teacher, guiding them through that. So
No, I know,
it did
but
affect a lot of them. all
I
along
know
the way.
I know it impacted a lot of them, but to expect like kindergartners and first grade at that time frame to use a computer, let alone them just like they should have just been like learning how to use like I don't know, it's just different. Like you're asking them to use computer and learn and study from a computer, and some of them were like 4.5, right? Between four
Yeah.
and a half and five and a
Yeah.
half. So yes, it did impact everyone, but I think their foundation setting might have been impacted more. And if we need to put additional resources and as they transition up to the middle school, it's just a thought. We can't solve that right
something to
here.
think about. Absolutely. Yep.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Jen.
And thanks for, yeah, thanks.
So I'll recognize Dean and then Ian.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to my fellow board members for bringing up these topics and discussing them in some detail. I'm going to come in from a slightly different angle because that's my nature. Much has been discussed about social emotional learning when we were first, and the public in general, and parents in general were first sold on the idea of introducing or looking at things through SEL and working through SEL. I think that it could be better described or was sold as essentially a way to learn about the student, find out where the student's coming from in order to educate them better. You had to know whether Susie was having a bad day, just to put it very, very briefly. This was my understanding. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going by, Ignite Change and other programs, and I don't know what other PD teachers are going through. There's SEL, and then there's transformative SEL, which is a species of SEL. And transformative SEL is the thing that I have a problem with. And you can tell me whether transformative SEL is what it is that we're engaged in. And I'll tell you I can tell you right now the problem that I have with it. It seems to be very focused on, it uses the terms communities. And you see this everywhere. We're building communities. We're trying to get the kids in touch with communities and healthy communities, always in the plural, not the singular. Now, I think I'm reasonably going to assume it's communities based on ethnic groups, race, gender, etc., the usual topics of the day. And I have a problem with that because I think it crystallizes and introduces and reinforces fractures. What is naturally a fractured society, I think our goal ought to be to unify the kids. There's a lot of soft language that's used, but you tell me, is it transformative SEL that's being used? Is it not the SEL that I thought we were engaged in, where we're talking about the personal SEL for the child? Instead, we're building, identities around communities. Who are you and what box do you fit in? And how does your box interact with the other box? Anyone can start.
I'll jump in. Our SEL and we use Second Step as our program for social emotional learning. And it primarily focuses on problem solving skills and coping strategies. So students learn if you have a disagreement with a peer, there's a whole set of problem solving skills for how you can resolve that problem. If you have an experience that's very embarrassing, what are some things that you can do? Like, what coping strategies do you have that can help you when you're struggling, when you're frustrated, when you're embarrassed, to deal with those emotions without becoming, aggressive, or without being really sad or becoming depressed. It's more Like, how do you handle situations? It's very separate from any conversations that we have for DEI. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Oh, it does answer my question. That's
okay,
exactly what I
good.
was looking at. That's why I was asking social emotional learning, as you described it, how to cope with yourself, how to
Yeah.
cope with others.
Yep, and
Uh,
that's we have a part-time SEL tutor, and that's we have students that still struggle with those things, and she helps them practice those skills or identify what they are feeling and what could we do better, or do differently next time so that we're not in this difficult spot.
And again, I'm asking because the materials provided by organizations that are that promote SEL, different types of SEL, I didn't make this up. They do refer to going beyond what you have said and going into quote communities, becoming. We use the phrase socially aware, which could mean almost anything. You can interpret that any way you want. But I know the intent of the and what's been described by others as socially aware, meaning what's your box and where do you fit and where are the other people in their box, and we're going to become, you know, collective groups negotiating with one another based on identities. And that is what I have a fundamental problem with. So I hope we're not promoting that. Anybody else care to jump in?
We do some stuff with the Playmaker project, talking about not just when things go wrong, but when things, how to take that outlook in general. Next month we're going to talk about gratitude and how to explore that, and what that means and how to be grateful for all the little things in life. So we talk about that as a whole community, as a whole school, but then they go off and do individual things in their own classroom. And we talk about each of those superpowers. The nice piece that matches with that is when we talk about restorative practices, when things do go wrong, we have those individual conversations, like Chris said, about how to handle those things and how to control those emotions and what that next step is. How do you feel and how did they feel? It's the perception of the other person. You might have said something that wasn't well received and you didn't realize it. So you need to understand how people receive things. So we have all those conversations as well, as far as working through situations, whether it's with a teacher, with another student, with admin, with a parent, whoever, all of those conversations. So that's how we approach those conversations. I don't necessarily think that any of us, and I probably shouldn't speak for everyone else, but we fit people into a box. I don't think that that's what we do. If you have a box that you fit into, that's absolutely your choice, but we are definitely not going to promote fitting into a spot. Like, you be you, and you have to accept everyone else the way that they are. I hope I said that the right way.
Well, there's no other way to say it, I suppose, except your way.
Well, don't get me going with that, because Chris will correct me.
Yeah, no, I remember when we were talking about wit and wisdom, and I brought up this objection that one of the criteria that was used to compare wit and wisdom with what we already had, running the blue team and the red team, so to speak, which whether the existing program or wit and wisdom was better at, for example, fostering critical consciousness. Diving into that one, that meant actually being very, very aware of who you were, what community you belonged to, and that. Again, I just have a problem with that one. It's a topic for a whole nother topic. It's a topic beyond this board, but it starts with the kids, and you want to make sure we get them off on the right foot, and we're not actually indoctrinating them with things. It's very easy to do. Anybody else? Because otherwise, I'm okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much. At this point, I'll recognize Ian.
Thank you, Jay. I wanted to circle back to talking about the site budgets, and there's some conversation amongst everyone there about class sizes and contemplating more staff versus more space. Again, I think these are very frank conversations we need to have as a board, looking at the needs of the district. And it's come up a few times where we're looking at what is the ideal class size, the student teacher ratio? I'm glad to hear that there's strong moves being made on the sites to try to keep it under 20, where possible. I think as a board and a district, we'd be well served to engage in some researched dialogue on what is an ideal number for certain age ranges. And again, this is all the idea of let's build a better budget and then defend that budget. We advocate for that budget, using the science, using the data that we can collect. In my experience, yeah, I think 10 to 15, is a great number depending on what the class is and what the class needs are. And I'm looking at it more like a both and approach, not an either or, between increasing staff and increasing space. Obviously, the two go hand in hand. But we have to kind of look at that holistically. First, what's going to meet the immediate needs. If the students have been impacted the most by COVID, I agree with Jen's observation. And as far as like the youngest among us took the hardest hits because those are foundational years. Like, there's a lot of science that backs that up. So as that cohort moves through time and advances, there's going to have to be, certain supports and strategies employed in order to compensate and hopefully repair as much as possible to whatever deficiencies may have developed due to those disruptions. So yeah, I mean, let's. I look forward to the next budget cycle, and I look forward to more conversations amongst the district administration and the board as far as like how can we get very purposeful, very intentional about where we want to go, in an idealized state. And I don't want to give anyone in the community undue anxiety about increasing budgets because I'm also a firm believer in efficiency. And I think, we need to take honest looks at how we operate within our budgets, as well as, when we do need to expand, services and, manage student to staff ratios. We do it very consciously and with, a long-term game plan. And also that goes with like site maintenance and things like that, so like trying to be more strategic about how we deal with the infrastructure so that we have more funding to work with to invest in the human capital. So that's all I really have to say about that. And I would just put I would definitely as far as the SEL stuff and various other things, I would look forward to another conversation another time with Dean there about critical consciousness and how that could be interpreted in a number of different ways. So but I do always welcome I'm a firm believer in a mosaic of perspectives when it comes to a board like such as this. So I think it's always important to have inclusive doesn't mean that we're all going to be on the same page, and we're all the better for it for having different pieces all fitting together. So, thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Chris, Seth, Ryan. We appreciate all these presentations and thoughts. We appreciate everything that you and your staff do every day. And thank you for taking time out of your day to present to us. And if there are no other questions, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, since Andrew's not here, I move we adjourn.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
I
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. We
Thank
are
you,
adjourned.
everyone. Great conversation. Appreciate everybody's hard work.